if you are a customer experience professional looking to deliver a rock star customer experience to your customers, and you are in the right place. Today, we're going to be talking to the one, the only Bruce Temkin. We're going to be talking about the year of humanity. Bruce, are you there?
I'm here.
Perfect. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on this. I'm excited to talk to the rock star.
No, well, that's I'm probably playing fast and loose with the term rock star, to be fair, but we'll go with it anyway. So look, what I'm going to ask you to do is there's probably not very many people watching this who don't know who you are, but for those that don't know who you are, tell them who you are, what you do.
So I'm Bruce Temkin. I am formerly the managing partner of Temkin Group. That's least interesting than who I really am, which is a passionate lover of customer experience. I created, co-founded, and was chair of the Customer Experience Professional Association. So I pretty much spend my time thinking about customer experience, human beings, organizations, and do everything I can to try and make everyone better at what they do.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So look, last year was the year of purpose, according to the Temkin Group. Now this year, it's the year of humanity. When you say humanity and the year of humanity, what exactly is it that you mean?
Yeah, so every year, Temkin Group identifies a theme that we think is important for the entire customer experience community. And the themes can be things that are related to customer experience that people aren't looking enough or we think is emerging that year. We've done empathy, emotion, employees as the year. This year, what we looked at was what's going on around the world, right? The whole level of discord between people and tension around, in countries and in politics and partisan extremes. We felt like the world just needed our collective community to stand up and try and focus on what's really important, our collective humanity. So we defined the 2018 as the Year of Humanity, which means for us, we focused some of our research, some of our energy, and some of our passion around that topic and trying to engage the entire customer experience community around it.
Okay, so I mean, like when you talk about that, what do you feel that really means for customer experience professionals?
Yeah, so for the Year of Humanity, we're looking at it at three levels. The first level is, what does it mean for individuals to improve humanity? So customer experience professionals, anyone as a human being, how do they focus more on improving humanity? We're also looking at it as a role of CX professionals, which you asked, I'll come back to that. How as a professional, we can improve humanity. And then the third level is, how can we as a collective customer experience community do that? So you asked about CX professionals, to go at that quickly. We have a concept called humanized customer experience, which has three elements: act with purpose, cultivate deep empathy, and create positive memories, which is really how do you think about people and focus on people in your work as a customer experience professional.
Okay, so those three things, it was purpose, empathy, and
memories.
Say again?
And memories.
Memories. Okay, so can we look at those one by one? So how would you suggest somebody defines a purpose?
So acting with purpose is a leadership technique. We would call it purposeful leadership, where if you think about the people around a purposeful leader understand the decisions that they would make and line up behind them because they have a clear set of values. So as a CX professional, we as individuals in our roles as leaders, but also with the leaders around us, make sure that our leaders are demonstrating purposefulness. So they make decisions that are consistent with the values. They are positive. They are persuasive. They're passionate. They show they show positive view of the future. We actually have a set of what we call 5 Ps, because we alliterate everything at Temkin Group. But the idea is, if you act with purpose, then not only will employees and the people around you follow you, but customers will want to be a part of it too, because human beings want to be part of something bigger than themselves.
Okay, so you mentioned values in that. How important is a set of values in being able to sort of work with a purpose?
Oh, it's critical, because if you think about it, organizations. And when I talk about organizations, we deal mostly with very large organizations. So those are the ones that I have in my mind most of the time. That if you have a lot of people, in a large organization, thousands, tens of thousands of people, if you think about your role as what you do, then you're not really a purposeful leader. A purposeful leader needs to think about, how do I influence the activities and the decisions of thousands or 10,000s of people? It even works in a smaller organization. But the only way to align those people is to have them understand a common set of values and to internalize those values. Therefore, all the decisions that they make are aligned with the decisions that you would make, right? If I'm a leader and trying to drive change across the organization, I can try and go one by one with every decision that's being made in the company. That'll be a crazy, crazy type of event, because there are millions and billions of decisions being made all the time. So the trick is, how do I instill the same values, the same understanding of a core set of values in all of the people around me? That way the decisions that they would make are in fact consistent with the decisions I would want them to make.
Yeah, I like that, because it's almost a case of, so that there can't be 10,000 yous in a company. And so the only way that you can really make sure that people would make decisions that you're happy with, and decisions that you would have them make, and possibly decisions you would make for themselves, is to have that set of values that people understand and live by and inform their decisions. So I like that. I like that way of looking at it. So moving on to the next one, empathy. I mean, number one, explain to me why empathy is so important.
Yeah, so empathy sounds like one of those things that is like motherhood and apple pie, right? At least in the States. And it's because human beings are naturally empathetic. We are born with mirror neurons running around in our head that, if I was to, when I go like that, hit my head, you feel it a little bit, you want to touch your head. So we're naturally empathetic. But it turns out that when we go into our organization, when we, as an individual, as an empathetic individual, we go into an organization, the way that organizations are structured, they actually crush customer empathy. There's a lot of natural things that go in an organization. So when we talk about empathy, why empathy is so important, 2 things. One is, empathy is important because we can't possibly serve our customers if we don't have a feeling for what they're feeling, right? If we don't look at the world the way they look at it. And the second reason why it's important is that we have to recognize these inhibitors that happen inside of organizations, find them and break them. So it's not the case that because human beings are naturally empathetic, they'll be empathetic at work. We have to find ways to make sure that that actually is being, is coming out in everything that people do, but also as CX professionals, that we keep an eye on what our customers as human beings really need and want.
Okay, so that's an interesting one, and it's interesting that you sort of describe it in that way, because I agree with you. You do tend to find that most people are empathetic, they're caring, they care for one another. But then, of course, when they get put into work, they tend to get put into little boxes, told, well, this is your job, do this, don't look at that, just focus. They get given targets, which focus them on doing activities that sometimes encourage them away from using their empathy. So as you say, it kind of gets crushed, it gets suppressed in people. So if somebody's watching now and they're saying, oh, you know what, that really resonates with me. I feel that I'm in an environment where I hired people who are very empathetic, very caring, but I feel that I've put them in a situation where that's been crushed. How do people reverse that process?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I don't think you can reverse the process because we talk about is the inhibitors inside of organizations are natural inhibitors. So as opposed to thinking we can reverse them like this, boom, it's all better. What we recommend is looking for the inhibitors and recognizing them and trying to overcome them as you see them, right? It's sort of like this never-ending battle because organizations are structured away. So the one inhibitor I think you referred to, we have a bunch of them. One inhibitor is the notion of organizational silos, right? And that is, the great example of that is we're doing a product launch. Our company's doing a product launch. Marketing does a great has this sort of marketing plan, and they go into market and there's huge uptick, right? They get 10 times the responses that they were planning for. And those responses lead to 10 times the calls in the contact center based on them. And the contact center is unable to answer any of the questions that come with the calls from that new product launch, right? So you have a marketing department that says, woo, great launch. And you have a support organization that goes, that was a disaster, right? Yeah. So one of we actually create an environment where we don't think of customers as much as we think about our own individual metrics. So that's one to look at. A few others to look at that you can overcome are what we call emotional illiteracy. Customers look at their experiences through the lens of three things: success, effort, and emotion. Turns out that emotion has by far the largest impact on their perception and their long-term loyalty. Yet when we're in organizations, we never even talk about emotion. Now, we don't even talk about emotion when we're at home often. We'll leave that aside. We're not going to focus on that now. But in organizations, we need to actually talk about emotion. How did our customers feel? Let's put words to them. And so we've created a bunch of language that people can use because we think it's important that they start talking about emotion. So those are two of the inhibitors. And so I think the trick is if you can recognize what are the things happening in your organization that will continue to inhibit customer empathy, then look for them and explicitly try and overcome them. But like I said, they don't go away. They're always there. So you have to be aware and alert all the time.
Yeah, it's a difficult one when it comes to the metrics because I'm a firm believer that you'll never consistently deliver customer success until you consistently measure the things that deliver it. And when you go into organizations, because I think a lot of them really are still operating with an industrial age mindset, a lot of the metrics are all based around tasks and activities and the completion of tasks and activities as if they're on a production line still. Whereas I believe there needs to be this big shift where pretty much every metric in the organization has some sort of line into customers and customer success. So that's an interesting topic that we'll circle back round to. But what I want to touch on here is that when you sort of mention about emotions and empathy, a lot of people don't want to talk about that, as you say, at home, but especially in business because it's too soft and fluffy. It's not, there's no like hard measures and metrics around it necessarily. There doesn't seem to be any ROI statistics on empathy. So if you were talking to somebody in an organization, he said, don't talk to me about emotion, don't talk to me about empathy, it's too soft and fluffy. How would you approach trying to change their mind?
I think I would separate those two things a little bit, empathy and emotion.
Okay.
I think let's start with emotion, which is that there actually is a lot of hard data that shows the ROI of emotion. We've published a lot on it, and pretty much anyone that's done any reasonable research on what drives customer loyalty comes to the conclusion that emotion plays a disproportional part in that. So pretty much on the emotion side, I would say if you care about customer loyalty, you have to care about customer emotion, right? And if you care about customer emotion as a driver of loyalty and your success, then you better well be talking about it in your business, right? So that's the emotion. With the empathy side, I think that's that's a tougher sell, right? Because empathy, I think, is a little bit more of a, considered a soft and squishy thing. But it comes back to, when we look at customer experience and when we look at organizations, our focus and the focus we try to get from all the leaders we deal with is not to think about organizations as sort of this collective mass of mush, right? What are organizations? They are a collection of individuals that make decisions that affect other individuals, which can be customers, partners, suppliers, the ecosystem around them. And if we stop thinking about organizations as this sort of mash of ethereal matter as people, then in order for us to improve the effectiveness of those, we need to look at people, human beings. And when we look at human beings serving other human beings, then it's really impossible to do that without really talking about empathy, right? Really recognizing empathy. And I think that one of the things we do, and I would urge everyone listening to do, is when you're talking about things like empathy and emotion, don't try and make executives who could care less care about it. The goal of the discussion is to find out what do they care about, and explain and translate into, if you want to be successful, if you want to grow the business, you want to grow share, you want our company to be thriving for the next 5 or 10 years, whatever the executive cares about, then I believe that you can find a clear path to customer emotion and the empathy of employees. But I would start with what they care about and work back into those things, as opposed to trying to get them to care about them to begin with.
Cool. So, I mean, on the emotional side of things, I think we can all pretty much agree, if we look at ourselves, the way that you feel affects how you think, and then the way that you think affects the actions that you take. You were saying about the measurements of emotion. How do you measure emotion and take into account the subjectivity of emotions, and that a certain level of feeling for me might affect one decision, whereas the exact same amount of emotion for you might affect a completely different action? How do you sort of make yourself get real hard data around emotions whilst dealing of that subjectivity of it?
Yeah, so I'm going to unpack that, because there's a lot of pieces to your question. And the first thing I'm going to come back to is, and I'm going to differ from the earlier assumption that you made, or assertion that you make, which is, I don't believe, and you didn't say this, but lots of people do, and it's sort of consistent with some of the discussion, right? A lot of people say you can't manage what you can't measure. I think that's a bunch of crap. We manage almost everything in our lives without measurements, right? You woke up in the morning, I woke up in the morning, I got out of bed, we washed up, we got dressed, we had breakfast, all of those things we did without any metrics associated with them. So when organizations say we have to have metrics around everything, what they're pretty much saying is we don't understand it enough that we're going to offload it to some numbers. And numbers are never enough to run an organization, right? So we have to have an understanding. Now, if we have numbers associated with that understanding, that's good. So back to the question about sort of measuring emotion and it's subjective. I will say that pretty much any customer feedback you get is subjective, right? There's who is the customer, what's the context, what's the environment that they're in, and that's shaping what they're telling us. It turns out that I don't think emotion is any more subjective. We just have to understand it a little better, right? And I think, first of all, if we understand emotions in general and say, all right, emotions aren't just this sort of random set of things, that there actually is good research out there that can identify a certain number and types of emotions. If we look for them and understand them, then we can figure out what we're doing. So for instance, most people think about emotions on sort of a single absolute scale, from like really happy to really sad, right? Sort of one scale. But there's lots of other emotions that in many cases are more important. And I'll share one of them, confidence. That it turns out that, and we've done a lot of research on what emotions lead to better outcomes for customers and business. And it turns out having a customer that is confident during or after an interaction is a very important for emotion for them to have.
Yeah.
So how can we figure out confidence? The same way we can ask them about anything else. How confident do you feel about going forward, or blah, blah, blah. And so we can find emotion in the same survey mechanisms we use. But there are also some really cool technologies that are coming out that can gauge emotion by actual conversation. You know, in a contact center, we can look at calls and analyze calls from speech analytics that go through a filter of emotion and do that. There are companies that are actually in real time looking at the emotion of a caller and suggesting what an agent should do to rectify an emotional problem that's happening. So I think that emotion is, as we understand it better, and it gets back to the metrics thing, I never want us to measure and try and manage something that we don't understand. We need to understand it a little bit better first, and then apply numbers to it, and we can measure some of it. But I think a lot of the technologies that are out there, a lot of things that we're learning are making it much easier and much more practical to talk about and sort of implement emotion-based types of activities.
Yeah, I like the way you describe the sort of, you get up in the morning, you get dressed, you brush your teeth, you do all that stuff, and you don't have to measure any of that because you just do it. But it's almost because of having that sort of goal or outcome in mind. So, for example, the reason I brush my teeth isn't because I like brushing my teeth. It's because I don't want them to fall out. And I suppose I want them to be nice and white. So when I smile, it looks good. And I don't want to get gum disease. So there's these sort of like macro outcomes that I want to achieve that I understand personally that inform how I go about doing the things every day. So would you suggest that that's a good way to go in business as well? Sort of empower people to be able to deliver certain outcomes rather than micromanaging every single thing that they do, and sort of empower them to find their own ways how to deliver that. What are your thoughts on that?
Cool. So I feel like you're lobbing me softballs here, because this is the discussion you had about why you brush your teeth. I actually want to push back on why you brush your teeth, because I don't think you brush your teeth because you want to avoid gum disease. I mean, you rationalize it that way. You brush your teeth because it's a habit. You don't even think about it. And this actually is an important part of our year of humanity. Is we're trying to get customer experience professionals to look at individuals and human beings differently than they do today. And this is one of the 6 areas that we talk about, which is that human beings are intuitive, not rational. So when you described why you brush, and I know you were just saying that, and we think that people act rational, right? But I will tell you that when people brush their teeth, they're not thinking about this or that. They're not, because think about what our lives would be like if every morning we woke up and we had to think about, okay, we're in bed, we have to put a foot out of our bed. Do we put our right foot out or our left foot out? Well, I'll put my right foot out because I'm stronger on my right foot and I'll be more level. Now what do? Do I take my left foot out, or do I lift my covers up? So we actually, even though there might be a rational reason why we're doing things, all the things we're doing are pretty much driven by our intuitive system, which are things that we just do naturally without thinking about. So if I wanted you, I go back to you brushing your teeth, right? If I wanted to have you brush your teeth, I could try and get you thinking about it rationally, but I'd be better off trying to think about how you make intuitive decisions and figure out, how do I make it easier for you to brush your teeth? How do I turn it into a habit that you're not thinking about? And that would be a more productive approach at trying to get you to brush your teeth than trying to continually to go after your rational self and explain all of this information about why it's better and why it's avoid gum disease. So thinking about human beings as intuitive people, those that are making decisions by heuristics and rules of thumbs and biases, as opposed to thinking rationally, is one of the ways that we encourage customer experience professionals to really rethink how they think about people.
Okay, cool. So you mentioned 6 areas, and I want to swing back round to that. But before we do that, I want to get to the last point that you made earlier about memories. So
Memories.
Talk to me a little bit more about memories. So we've had purpose, empathy, and memories. Tell me more about that.
Excellent. I keep giving you 5 of these and 6 of those to come back, so your notes get longer and longer.
Yeah.
But you're doing a good job. So we talked about purpose, empathy, and now memories. It's creating positive memories. Turns out that our memories are not like GoPros, right? It's not like we have a GoPro on our head. We're recording video all the time, and anytime we want to think about the past, we pull up some video footage. Our memories are more like an Instagram account, right? Where we're snapping a picture here or there at moments that we think are important. So when we pull back our memory, what we do is we look at a bunch of Instagram pictures and we piece together a story that connects them. Now, it turns out that that story we do with those pictures in the past sometimes look like the actual experience we have, but sometimes it doesn't. So we remember things in ways that are different than they actually happened. And the reason that's important is if we understand what pictures people are taking, then we can affect their experience so they take pictures that are of things that we think are going to help them have a positive memory of interacting with us. And it turns out there's been a lot of work in behavioral economics and neuroscience to understand many of the things that drive those memories, drive those pictures that we take. The quickest one to talk about is just the work that's historically done by Daniel Kahneman, one of my best and one of the first really well-known behavioral economists, who introduced this thing called the peak-end rule. Very simply, he did a lot of research and looked at the way people remember an experience is by an average of the peak, high or low of their experience, of their emotional state and how it ended. And so we have a lot of recommendations, but pretty much the quickest recommendation you get from that is make every ending count. Because we're going to take a snapshot of the ending, and therefore we should put disproportional energy, disproportional investment in making sure the endings of experiences are good.
Okay, so what I want to talk to you about is, so I'm with that. I think that's, I mean, arguably you'd want to make all of it really good, but like as a quick fix, if you want people to remember the experience in a particular way, make the ending really good.
Well,
now, go on.
Yeah. So I want to challenge a little. This is not about a quick fix. This is about and you said ideally, which I would agree with, you'd want to make all of it good experience. But this is where we deal with companies that have fixed amounts of investment, fixed amount of people, and have to make trade-offs all the time. And that pretty much describes every organization in the world. So every CX professional should be trying to find out where should we disproportionately invest our time and energy to improve experience and not fall into the belief every single interaction better, because it was conceptually good. The reality is that we are faced with constraints of resources, constraints of focus. And one of the constraints that we don't often even think about is that organizations can only change at a certain pace, right? Even if I had all the investment in the world in people and in my customer experience team, there's only change that an org. I can't change everything that is faced with the decision of where do we prioritize our energy and our focus. And I think that thinking about those interactions like the endings isn't only a quick fix. That to me is a constant understanding of where do we prioritize our efforts.
Okay, so what I want to ask about the end is, what do you define as the end of an experience?
That's a real excellent question, because it depends on the experience. Look, and lots of the answers I have are it depends, I think that an ending of an experience is when a customer conceptually thinks that a particular interaction has ended in their mind. So, for instance, and there are different levels. So, if I have, let's say I'm calling up a health insurer to find out if my health plan is covering a medical treatment that I need, then there is one ending to that, if I call up, is just the end to that call. But let's say that call I didn't get all the answers I needed, and I had to go somewhere else and find out more information. Then that interaction continues, and there'll probably be an end to that interaction. So there are levels of endings. There are endings to specific interactions. There are endings against multiple interactions, which have to do with a goal I'm trying to do. All of those have endings, and they all work the same way, right? I can affect how I think about a certain interaction. I can affect how I think about a certain set of interactions that I'm attempting to do a goal, and so that there are different endings for different levels of things that I'm looking at. But it goes back to just ask the question: when does a customer think that particular interaction or that particular goal has ended? And you'll find them everywhere.
Okay, so I agree that dependent on the situation, the type of customer, the ending could be something very different. It could be the end of a particular sequence. It could be the end of the entire experience. I get that. So what do you feel about, let's put yourself in the position of a customer. You go through an experience. It's all pretty good. The ending's really good. You think it's ended, but then it hasn't quite ended because you get a text saying, on a scale of 1 to 10, would you recommend us to your friends and family? Which then is extending the experience. It's moving the end point, but then to something that's quite meh. It's not really anything. It's quite boring. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Does that count, or is there a different way to think about it, or why am I wrong?
No. I think you're right. I think first of all, the process of asking for customer feedback is in fact an experience, right? And so we have to think about it that way, and it certainly can color the ending of another experience, right? I would say that if we had a really good experience let's say we called into a contact center, it really went well and it ended well, I think a customer would think about that as an ending. And then if, a few days later we got a survey, we think of that as something different. So I don't think that the survey itself would affect how we think about that contact center experience, but it definitely can shape how we think about the company, because that survey in itself is an experience, right? So if, let's say we had a good experience, and I'll tell you a little different, right? Let's go, and it happens in the States a lot. You're going to buy a car, right? Let's say you had a really good experience with a car salesman. You bought a car you love. You're closing out, right? And you love the car, you love the experience, you're feeling good, right? Experience is about to end. But as part of that experience, before you go out, the sales manager says, hey, listen, I need you to give me a 10 on that scale of 0 to 10. I have to have a 10. If you can't give me a 10, I'm going to lose my job. We really are measured around here. I need a 10. So let me know now if you can't give me a 10, because I'll find out about it, and I'll really want to know from you whether you do me. If I had an experience like that, then we're actually turning the feedback into a problematic ending, because there it's sort of attached to the ending. So I think we do have to think about the overall feedback system as an experience itself and how it plays into the overall experience we provide for our customers.
Yeah, I agree, because I mean for the people out there that have seen a lot of my stuff, I'm not a big fan of customer feedback at all, which I know sounds crazy. And you might think, well, how could this guy think that he's talking to people about customer centricity, but he doesn't like customer feedback? And the way I think about it is that really we should, again, in an ideal world, we should understand our customers so well, and we should understand their needs and their successful outcomes, that we should be measuring in the experience ourselves whether it's going well or not, without even having to ask the customer. We should already know whether it went well or not, and then act accordingly. So if we know it didn't go well, you work to put it right and apologize. Or if it did go well, you capitalize it. And the way I look at it is kind of like this. Customer experience is a lot like sex. Okay, if you're any good at it, you don't need to ask how it went, if that makes sense.
So I'll keep in mind, I always say customer experience is like teenagers having sex. They all think they're doing it. No one knows if they're doing it right, and everyone lies about it. So going back to, I agree, you do not need customer feedback. You need customer insight. And so then the question is, how do you get customer insight? And there's not a direct path between customer feedback and customer insight. You have to do some interpretation of it. So what we say is, and I agree, if you had an organization, like there are organizations that have a really good handle and understanding of their customers, they don't need to bother with a survey, right? Because the goal isn't, and I think that's what you're saying, the goal isn't customer feedback. Now, in large organizations, it's hard sometimes to really make sure you have a pulse on it, on customers, and have true customer insight. And what I would say there, and certainly where we're going in our work with lots of organizations on their customer insights plan, is that we ought to think about the goal getting to like what you talk about. How can we understand our customers based on their actual behaviors, right? Yeah. How can we understand them better? And I think the technology, and there's a lot of good predictive analytics around that. So we always look at is, so customer feedback should not be thought of as the insight. It's one element that collective with other things drives us some insights. But your point is exactly right, that too many companies start thinking that the goal is feedback, right? And so they think the goal is a survey, and the goal is some number on a survey. And then all they become is sort of number hounds, right? I don't understand my customers any better if I can tell you they give me an average of 7.2.
Yeah, exactly. Like, imagine that, like walking into the boardroom, it's like, guys, good news, 7.2, and everyone goes, what? But the thing is, what I think is, it does depend on the level of maturity of a company, because there's lots of different companies out there, and they're all at different levels of customer experience maturity. What are your feelings around customer experience maturity, and what do you think, like, are some ways that you can measure it for yourself?
Yeah. So customer experience maturity is, I think, a absolutely central theme, because companies need to do things and behave differently based on the stages they're on. We have a maturity model. 6 stages of maturity that go from all the way from ignore, which is stage 1, to embed, which is stage 6. And it's sort of interesting because we have together the maturity model, and we actually have an online assessment. So if you want to go do it yourself and see where you belong, it's cxassess.com. cxassess.com should be easy to remember. But we look at the 6 stages, and you see, as you're in earlier stages of maturity, pretty much the idea is you got to get the organization to care about it and think about it, and just start doing pretty much anything, right? At higher stages of maturity, the role of a customer experience professional becomes differently, because as opposed to in earlier stages where we're just trying to get some things done that we can do and inform the rest of the organization, at higher stages of maturity, we actually have to affect how the whole rest of the organization operates. We have to change their processes. We have to change their metrics. We have to change their goals. We have to change how they actually, the competency models around how they hire and promote their people, right? So in earlier stages, it's really about what customer experience professionals can do and change sort of on their own with a group or an extended group. Higher stages of maturity, how do we change how the entire organization operates? Because a customer-centric organization is not one that has a strong customer experience department. It's one that embeds good customer-centric activities and behaviors in all of the employees.
When it comes to a customer-centric organization, like the term a customer-centric organization, how do you classify that? Is there a point at which you have done enough customer-centric stuff that you can say we're now customer centric, or is it one of those sort of theoretical ideals that you've got to work towards, but technically nobody ever achieves because you can always be more customer centric in some way? So my question is there a specific point at which you can, in good faith, call yourself customer centric, or is it just one of those things that people should be aspiring to all the time?
That's a great question. So first of all, when the attributes that we use to define a customer-centric organization, there are 4 competencies: purposeful leadership, compelling brand values, employee engagement, and customer connectedness. And you are only as customer-centric as your weakest component. And so there are companies that I think have gotten to the point where it would be fair for them to describe themselves as customer-centric. But I like the way you describe it as an ideal, because the companies that we work with that are probably the ones that you would describe and that people outside would describe themselves as being customer-centric are not happy with where they are. It's sort of this interesting thing, right? You have people who are at the bottom of the maturity curve who tend to be can be happy with where they are, right? They don't recognize how important it is. They haven't put the energy in. And you can have people at the high end of the maturity curve who are equally unhappy with where they are. Because I find that as you become a more customer-centric, and I think it is an evolution, as you become more customer-centric, I think you actually become you become less happy with what you've achieved and recognize that there's always room for more. So I would also go back to one of the things about organizations is you can never be complacent with where you are on a customer centricity curve, because the organizations will always, left alone, fall back to old practices and old habits. So it's not like you can say, okay, we've gotten to a point of customer centricity. Yay, we don't have to do anything more. We'll stay here. The fact is you'll devolve. So any change requires a lot of energy to sustain and move forward.
Yeah. And I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? Is as you start to mature as an organization, your aspirations change, your expectations change. So you're always looking to achieve that next thing. Your mind opens, your horizons broaden, and you start to see what more is possible. So you want to achieve more. So it's interesting when you say that there are some people who are very low on the maturity curve that are quite happy with where they are, but it's almost because they don't know what is a possibility. But there's people quite high that are unhappy with where they are because they can see what the future could be like. So I like the way of looking at it like that. What I want to do now is go back to those 6 areas you spoke about earlier. What did you call them? Not individually, but what's the name of them? 6.
Yeah, so we call it the 6 components of human behavior.
6 components of human behavior. Tell me about the 6 components of human behavior.
So back to our year of humanity, right? We really felt like it was important to help customer experience professionals really look at everyone they deal with, employees around them, leaders, their customers, as human beings. Now, when it sounds like it's, of course we are. Of course we're going to focus on what else would we do? But what we do, one of the things we do at Temkin Group is try and take ideas and concepts that seem straightforward or that no one has really a structured way to think about it and add structure. So we looked around. I mean, we work on lots of areas of human behavior all the time, and we identified 6 characteristics of human beings that we really think it's important for customer experience professionals to keep in mind when they think about those people as customers or employees. And the 6 are: the first is intuitive. Human beings are intuitive. We talked about that earlier, right? They make decisions based on rules of thumb much more than they do on rational thinking. The second is they're self-centered, meaning we all look at the world through our own lens. And as an employee, you understand more of the customer's rules, nomenclatures, product structures, and processes than your customers. So you're going to have a different lens, and your self-centeredness is going to have a different point of view than customers. The third is emotional. We talked a little about that, right? That our customers act and remember emotions, yet we oftentimes won't even talk about emotions in the company. The fourth is that human beings are motivated. And by motivated, we mean that they're motivated to serve their intrinsic needs, and human beings have 4 intrinsic needs: the need for meaningfulness, choice, competence, and progress. I won't go through all those because it will take a long time, but the idea that when you think about employees, oftentimes we spend a lot of time talking about their compensation and all of that, but it turns out that if we really want to motivate employees, we have to satisfy those intrinsic goals. And that's good news, right? Because we don't have to talk to our HR departments to figure out how we're going to satisfy people's intrinsic needs. We just have to focus on them. The 5th area is social. Human beings desire to be part of a larger group, to be part of a group that shares a common purpose and a common set of beliefs that they do. So that's important both for employees and customers. And finally, human beings are hopeful. We flourish when we envision a positive future. So if we keep those 6 things in mind: intuitive, self-centered, emotional, motivated, social, and hopeful, then we can use those to affect how we interact with customers, employees, partners, leaders, as individuals who have unique characteristics.
Yeah, it's a nice way to look at it, and it sums everything up. And like we were talking earlier about like values and missions and those sorts of things really sort of touch upon multiple areas, because, for example, if you've got a core set of values and that becomes the way that you make decisions built into everything, then that covers the whole intuitive side of things. If it's a social thing, if they're shared values, if everybody's sharing them together, that the sort of hopeful side of things as well, that you're all working together to achieve these things. I think it covers, like, it's nice, it's good, it covers up a lot. What I want to talk to you about, though, is choice. Okay, so when you talk about choice, are you talking about giving employees choice or customers choice, or both?
So this is the intrinsic goal is around choice. Mostly we focus on employees for this, and I'll come back to choice for customers and choice in general. That when we talk about choice, it's not the, that I can do A, B, C, or D like with a customer. It's really that for an employee to feel fulfilled, they have to have some control in the decisions that are being made in their environment, right? Yeah. So if I was to tell you that, okay, here's what you're going to do. I'm going to give you a list of things. You click on the start video, and you ask just this question. When they're done, you just ask that question. And when you're done, you just ask that question. And I gave you all those questions, and you had no choice of actually improvising or coming back. You wouldn't feel any connection with what you're doing. Yeah. So part of us feeling connected with our work is allowing us to have choice in the decisions that are being made around it. And that's the choice we're talking about. Choice with customers is a different thing, because too much choice can run into a problem, and that can create decision anxiety. And so too much choice can be a problem. But the choice we're talking about in terms of the intrinsic goal is the fact that employees need to have some control over the decisions they're making about the work that they're doing.
Okay, I completely agree with you when it comes to giving customers choice. I feel that if you need to give your customers choice, it's just an admission that you don't really know what they need. Because if you really knew what they needed, you'd just give them what they need. And there's a lot of companies out there at the moment that are thriving by giving customers less choice, which is kind of, again, counterintuitive. You'd think, well, surely a customer-centric company would give all the choices possible. But as companies understand their customers better and understand customers' needs better, they're starting to give them less choice, because it is, again, I feel that it's an admission that I, as a company, don't really know how to deal with you, so I'm going to give you all these choices and see which one you. So, what's your thoughts on that?
Or there's another way, and I agree with that. I'm going to give you sort of an example of that shows up in a little different way. So we work with many of the large technology companies, the world's largest technology companies, and many of them especially we're talking B2B, on the B2B enterprise side. Yeah. there are a couple shifts going on. One clear shift is we're working on the move from premise-based software to cloud-based software, and there's a whole bunch of stuff going on with that. But in terms of their sales model, right? They wanted to satisfy customers' needs so much that they would do whatever the customer wanted. So a lot of them are saddled with these individual contracts with individual set of requirements and development trees for each customer. So it sounds like we're satisfying our customers' needs because we're giving them choice. But the fact is that those companies need to be smarter at what is in the best interest of the company long term, right? It's not in your best interest as a customer of mine for me to give you access to a software tree that I'm not going to maintain, or that's going to cause you problems because we're never going to be able to support it with the level that we can do our mainstream. So it's really, we're pushing and the sales process in B2B enterprise software to be what we call more prescriptive, right? Recognize you as a technology company should have a better understanding of what your customers need and are going to need. And it's not good enough just to ask them what they need and sort of create stuff that gives them that causes long-term problems. So you have to build in your organization a better understanding of what's going to drive their long-term success. And you need to explaining it to them so that they recognize what's in their best interest. So that's another thing, goes back to sort of the way you were talking about it, and shows up in enterprise B2B sales as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because the way you spoke about it then, it makes me think, surely the technology company should know more about the technology than the customer buying that. They should know the right way to do it. And I think it comes back to understanding their needs, understanding their goals and their outcomes, and saying, well, look, these are the things that are going to help you achieve those in the best way. Not going to a customer and saying, well, how do you think we should run our business? I get that. So what I want to ask you now is, let's say people watching this say, you know what, I've really enjoyed understanding a little bit more about, improving humanity and looking at the different ways I can do that. What advice would you give somebody if they could only do one thing to help improve humanity? What would you say? What would you suggest that one thing be?
So if you could only do one thing, then I would look at yourself as an individual. We talk about the 3 levels of what we're trying to do with the Year of Humanity is focus on individuals, customer experience professionals, and then us as a collective community. I would urge you to look at yourself and think about how you can do better across the 3 things we talk about. We haven't talked about here is embrace diversity, extend compassion, and express appreciation. That while we can make a difference as professionals and as part of a broader community, the one thing I would ask you to do is really look at what you do every day as a human being, and every day what you do with other human beings, and think about how you can, as in the way that you work, in the way that you are, in the way that you interact with other individuals, be inspiration for all of us to be more humane.
Yeah, that's nice, man. And in the times we're living in at the moment, with the amount of turmoil, the amount of disagreement going on, it's one of those things where even if you come across people that you completely disagree with, being able to treat them with respect and, it's that old just be nice thing that you can start to influence others that will then influence others and influence others. So I think that's a great one. If you really want to start to improve humanity, look at yourself first, change the way that you behave with people, and hopefully influence the way that they behave with other people too. So that is fantastic. Look, we've come to the end of our time together now. Thank you so much for doing this. I've had a wicked time. We've had a brilliant conversation. I just want to ask one last thing. So for the people watching, if they do want to get in contact with you, there are some links in the description. But for you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
So I'll give you one thing. Go to yearofhumanity.com. yearofhumanity.com. We have great resources there and access to, you can find my email and the Temkin Group stuff and my Twitter account, all of that. But if you're going to go one place, please go to yearofhumanity.com.
Perfect. Great stuff. So, guys, make sure you do that. Make sure you drop a little comment to Bruce, thanking him for being with us today. And look, if you want to get 3 free chapters of my new book, Put Your Customers Second, which probably will be finished at some point, I promise, then there is a link in the description too. You can have those for free. Let me know what you think. And if you haven't yet bought this book, which I wrote by accident, do that. It has been #1 in a bunch of categories on Amazon for over a week now, which is pretty cool. Probably won't be for very much longer. I think people are bored of it now. But do that. And otherwise, until next time, keep on delivering that rock star customer experience.